So let's see here. I think we might have critical mass on getting started. So let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you, everybody, for another fabulous edition of the Finance and Operation Committee meetings. We have an agenda today that I think what we'll be doing, if there's no objection, is moving one of the discussion items up to the top of the meeting, which is the item on the review of the City of New Haven purchasing policy. Mr. Lamb?
Thank you. I spoke to Michael Gormany after we spoke.
Yes.
And he has a little bit of a conflict issue. It's probably going to be Sean that's going to be joining us instead of him.
Okay.
I have not had confirmation on that yet. But Michael had an emergency that he needed to deal with his schedule for something with his family.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Okay. So will you advise when? I'm happy to move that item up because I know these are busy people, and also Attorney Lamar also, I think, is on for this item. Am I correct? So just want to, make it work for them in their schedules.
Attorney Lesiotis is on, and he'll probably be joining into that conversation as well.
Okay.
I have not gotten confirmation that Ms. Lamar is going to be here.
I'm here, Tom.
Oh, you are? Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
It's okay.
Yeah. I was saying I didn't receive confirmation either, but I'm looking at her. So, okay. So if we'll go ahead and jump into our action items then, if that's what you're suggesting we do, Mr. Lamb, and then
Yes.
when we want to move into that item, just let me know, and we can do that so that they can get to their other meetings that I imagine they have. Okay. So in that case, we will go ahead and stick with the agenda for now, and we'll jump into it. And the first items are a Head Start COLA and Quality Improvement Grant is our first abstract. Ms. Derwin?
Good evening, everyone. This is an abstract for $495,704 for a cost of living increase grant, as well as a quality improvement grant. The amount of money is predetermined by the Office of Head Start. So it is based on your existing payroll and your grant. So the majority of the funds, $413,749, goes to offset any increases that our staff members have received through their collective bargaining units, and any increases in benefits. And there's a small portion of money that is for quality enhancement, and that is dictated by guidelines. So the way we are purposing that money is there will be $75,000 that goes to our contractual line that will allow us to have an additional mental health clinician with Clifford Beers. We're using approximately $7,000 to purchase new car seats for the busing to the Dr. Mayo Center. And there's an allowance for 6 additional part-time staff to work either in the classroom or to support the family service workers.
All right, thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the committee on this item?
Not for me.
Right. Hearing and seeing none, we'll go ahead. Thank you very much, Ms. Derwin, and we'll go ahead and move on to the next 2 abstracts. Both are low performing school bond related. Ms. Bonanno?
Yep, so we applied for these funds last July and the bonding commission just released the funds in May. Both of these are for capital improvements, technology, things of that nature. So there was 2 schools in the district that qualified at the time of application. That was Wexler Grant and Hill House. We applied for both. The Wexler Grant abstract and project covers infrastructure updates to their outdoors, including their basketball court and playground. And Hill House has invested their entire award in technology infrastructure. So adding smart boards to most of the classrooms within the school building. So once the board approves and accepts these, we are ready to move forward, at least at Hill House, and getting that technology in place for the start of the school year. And then there will be obviously some additional planning needed for Wexler Grant with the outdoor space.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions on either of these 2 items? All right, I had none either. Thank you all for applying for these. Sounds like some good and needed improvements.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move into the agreements now, the first one of which is an agreement with ACES for board certified staff. Ms. Jackson?
Hi, this is an agreement with ACES to provide us with our board certified behavioral specialist to service our students primarily within our pre-K program, but more specifically for our students with autism spectrum disorders across our district to help with the programming. This, if you know, this was, I'm sorry, I'm hearing something in the background. I don't know if it's background for me, but anyway, this amount allows for us to be able to provide not only the embedded support, but it also allows for us to provide some professional development for our staff across the district as well.
All right, thank you. Is there any comments or questions on this item? All right, I had none either. I just received word that Mr. Garris has joined us. Are we ready, Mr. Lamb, to move on to that discussion item?
Yes.
All right. So just again, as I mentioned earlier, we were going to be moving this item up, which is the last discussion item, which is review of the City of New Haven purchasing policy, distinction between a multi-year contract and a single-year contract with options to renew. Just as brief background to this, some questions came up in our last board meeting. People still seem to be confused on this item, even though we've had some explanations before, but we want to make sure everybody's on the same page on this. And so we've invited some folks here to explain this to us again. So I don't know who is going to speak first on this, but the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. This is Sean Garris, the acting purchasing agent for the City of New Haven. On our solicitation document in reference to optioned versus a multi-year, we consider the multi-year going out as a multi-year agreement, stating that it's going to have multiple years upfront with the document. The option to renew is just as it states that the option is at the discretion of the city if it elects to move forward. And that simply is that. There is pending matter before the Board of Alders to clarify this and some other language scheduled for August, and would probably put a lot of this information or questions to rest. So it might be appropriate if we can kind of defer till August, after August.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else going to speak on this? Or shall I open it up for some questions?
It would be my preference to answer questions if I can.
All right, thank you.
I'm bringing Michael Gormany in as well. He just signed on. Can we hold up one sec?
Sure.
And Ms. Bourne, I'm inviting you into the panel. You can accept the invitation.
Right. Well, we'll welcome Mr. Gormany and also Ms. Bourne. So Mr. Garris had just provided us a brief overview and also mentioned that the alders are also going to be taking a look at this, possibly to clarify some of this. But we were about to open it up for questions, but I didn't know if anybody else wanted to speak on this first.
No, my apologies for being late. I was finishing up another meeting. I believe Mr. Garris covered everything. So I think I'm all set, Mr. Wilcox.
All right, thank you, sir. Are there comments or questions from the committee? Dr. Yarbrough.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for being here. Just my first question, what's thought will be the conversation topic that the alders will have? And are we thinking a decision is going to be made around language, or is it just a conversation as it relates to clarity, or what are the topics?
So the ordinance, so what we did was the ordinance had not been updated in about 10 to 15 years in regards to dollar values, bid RFP thresholds, things like that. One of the areas that we did look at was actually the options to renew area within the ordinance itself. So the ordinance will clarify strictly what needs Board of Alder approval and what does not, even when it pertains to when options apply. So we looked at making that language very clear in this upcoming ordinance before the Board of Alders. So that way there wouldn't be any interpretation or anything like that.
Thank you very much. And our current practice is that the Board of Education exercises the options to renew without additional approval once a contract is in place with options.
Correct. That's what the city has. Again, this clarifies because it's an interpretation piece. I'm not sure what Mr. Garris mentioned, but we've been following what we've been doing prior, based on someone who had 30 years of experience in purchasing for both the city and the Board of Ed. I understand there's some other interpretations of that, but I think this ordinance will clear everything up when it comes to that. So right now we are currently following the process that we have been, especially since, unless I haven't talked to the chair of finance for the Board of Alders yet, but the last time I talked to him, we were certainly going to hear this ordinance in August. So I think between now and August, hopefully, we'll certainly have some clarification pretty soon on it.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I just had a couple of questions here. So so the thing that the alders are going to be looking at updating the ordinance, in addition to clarifying language around multi-year versus a 1 year with options and what has to go before the alders, is they're going to be looking at that, as well as looking at the threshold amounts as to, currently contract over $100,000, if I remember correctly, has to be reviewed by the alders and voted on. And they're going to take a look at that and see what their will is in terms of those thresholds. So it's not just looking at this language, it's also looking at the totality of these purchasing guidelines and thresholds. Is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Wilcox. And it's everything that we've seen, including clarifying some wording in the ordinance, looking at dollar thresholds from bid and RFP processes to non-bid contracts to cooperative purchasing. Just we tried to look at the overall gamut of purchasing when we submitted the ordinance, and just clarifying things that have been issues in the past with this update.
And so my understanding is that for the current rules that we're operating within, the district is in compliance, as is other city departments, in terms of when things are going before the alders, when it's more than $100,000, or when it's a true multi-year contract where we are binding the district and therefore also the city to paying for those things over time. As opposed to also, we're also in compliance when it comes to a regular contract that has some options to renew. So my understanding is that we're in compliance, and I guess I'll ask that question first.
I can jump in on that one. The ordinance that requires the Board of Alders review and approval specifically addresses automatic renewals. Discretionary renewals are not there. That automatic is pretty unambiguous.
Yeah.
But the proposal that is before the Board of Alders it clarifies, frankly, I don't know why this is a I don't know why this is a confusion. I mean, automatic renewal is very simple. It's an automatic renewal. And if a discretionary renewal is not automatic. So I don't have a problem with the policy and the protocol and the practice that has been going on. But I do agree with our acting controller and budget manager, or budget director. I don't know, you have so many titles, Michael, I can never remember, that the ordinances for purchasing did need some updating, and there is a comprehensive proposal that is before the Board of Alders, and that will address this and many other issues.
Okay, so it'll make it crystal clear, hopefully, as opposed to what seems pretty clear when it comes to things like automatic.
Yes.
So if I could just a couple more questions here, and then I see Mr. Lamb has his hand up. So also my understanding is that if we were not in compliance for some reason on this would get, as things go through the purchasing process, things can get flagged that says, wait a minute, you're not doing this correctly. It bounces back. And we have an opportunity to fix that problem. And my understanding is that's the way it is with anything that goes through purchasing. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so even if we did have a mistake or a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation, it would be found and flagged by the people, the city employees, to make sure purchasing happens correctly.
That's correct, Mr. Wilcox. Both purchasing and corp counsel provide additional eyes to the review process. And anything that there has been in the past, we've brought it to Tom's attention, and he's made the means to correct it.
And so just as a final clarification is also, I mean, a typical and automatic renewing contract, that's something like what the potential transportation contract we were going to enter into would have been a multi-years with structured increases in contractual things over that time that would be happening automatic. We were agreeing to it up at the front. The alders would have taken a look at that. That's one example of a true multi-year. And the other is like some that we look at, which might be well, we have some examples here of like contracts for on-call asphalt repairs and replacements. Whereas if they'll agree to the same agreement with no increase in costs, we'll agree to carry it on another year, and that those are there's so many options that are allowed under city purchasing policy. So am I kind of summing up the distinction between them?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So Mr. Lamb, did you have something you wanted to add or subtract?
Yes, just a point of clarification. On the $100,000 limit for Board of Alders, that applies to professional services and sole source contracts. So any contracts that go through the bid process or the RFP process would not be subject to that amount.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Red Hannons?
Good evening, everyone. So I have a question as it relates to curriculum. And where does curriculum fall in the requirement to go before the Board of Aldermen? I've received conflicting information, so clarity around that would be extremely helpful.
Did you have an example or?
So, for example, we had a contract, let's say with Curriculum Associates. This is someone that we receive textbooks from, and as well as professional development, right? So the textbooks we would do through a normal purchase order. But when it comes to professional development, do we need to go before the Board of Alders after the Board of Ed has approved us to partner with Curriculum Associates, for example?
So it's my understanding with the ordinance is that if the dollar amount is over, and let me back up. Something like this would require like a sole source designation for the curriculum for that educational piece. And that if the amount is over $100,000 within that year, would need to go before the Board of Alders to approve that.
So
And there's,
Mhm.
I'm
So
sorry.
I'm sorry if I can. So, Ms. Red Hannons, I think what we look at it from the purchasing side is the dollar amount, the dollar threshold, not necessarily the particular. We look at it from the dollar threshold and the services, right? As Sean, Mr. Garris mentioned, if it's designated as a sole source, as the only provider, which is only something that purchasing can do, then you have up to 99,000 to go for that particular contract or agreement. Basically, any contract that does not have a procurement process associated with it and it's above $100,000 needs Board of Alder approval.
So then let me, for clarity, because you mentioned the sole source. It's a particular curriculum. We've purchased the program, HMH into reading. Now we want to bring in the job embedded coaching across the district. It's going to cost us $250,000, and I'm throwing it out as an example.
Yep.
Do we still need to go before, because we're over the $100,000 threshold?
You need Board of Alder approval, yes.
Okay, so then, and if I could, and Ilya, I see your hand. If I can add to, the sole source has become somewhat of an, it's also something that we're wrestling with on this side. Because if I tell you someone's coming in to do math professional development, there are tons of folks that will do math professional development. But we're saying we want this particular program, that they have program of study for PD. Do we still need a sole source? Because they're the only ones that can provide the exact program of study that we're looking for.
So, and Mr. Garris can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a criteria that we look at purchasing to designate something as a sole source. Basically, we ask the department, in this case, the Board of Education, who handles curriculum, you need to be able to demonstrate to us, in order for it to be a sole source, that this is the only provider that can provide those services. That's kind of how we take a look at it, is, when we say sole source, they're the only ones who can do it. Now, if you come back into us and say that 3 vendors provide this service, right? That's not a sole source. So we basically look at the criteria in designating that particular vendor as a sole source. Did I miss something, Sean?
No, Mr. Gormley, just to add a slight caveat with that. As you mentioned, the curriculum that you purchased, and then someone coming behind that purchase. If you know up in front that there's going to be a long-term relationship with this particular vendor, that's the time to start the process and saying this is proprietary association. And that's an easy for me to kind of acknowledge the fact that this will be a sole source in relationship to that particular product. Typically, the sole source letters can be from a finite period of time to an infinite period of time. The only issue with that is if you get another vendor eventually coming along, they can challenge that, and then we would need to possibly open it back up to a possible solicitation process. And I'm speaking in general with that, not particularly to what we're speaking about education, but in general, regards
So
to the sole source.
my last
sorry.
question, because I see other people have questions. If we do an RFP
Yes,
and it's over $100,000, do we still need now to go to the Board of Alders as well if we did an RFP?
is it a multi-year?
Is let's say no. Let's say no. I know if it's multi-year, we have to. But what if it's just 1 year?
If you're doing a
Hmm.
1-year contract, remember the $100,000 threshold with the Board of Alders is when there is no procurement process attached to it. So if I go out and I say, I want, ABC company to do, curriculum for 150,000, just because you like ABC company, that would require Board of Alder approval. If you did an RFP process and you went through a legitimate scoring process, legitimate procurement process, it was publicly advertised, and it ended up costing you $150,000 for a year, you do not need Board of Alder approval. It's only when there's no procurement process attached to how you're selecting that vendor is when you need Board of Alder approval.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Attorney Alexiadis?
Yeah, my question with regard to Ms. Redhannon's example, how much was the curriculum associates, the curriculum piece of it?
Oh, I don't have that off the top of my head. I gave the theoretically $250,000. But we received, so we ended up receiving sole source. It took a few months, but we received a sole source letter for curriculum associates.
So, and I think with regard to the professional development, and for that matter, curriculum pieces, it depends on how you defined it. Because, we were talking about a math professional development. If you define it broadly as math professional development, then there's lots of people who can do that, but you don't necessarily want, Joe's math class. You want something, legitimate, and you're looking for a particular program of professional development, and there may, in fact, only be one provider that can provide that particular program.
Yeah, Ilya, I illustrated it as an example. We were very specific when we started the process. We started it in late November, early December. We didn't receive the sole source letter until April. And so we could not move forward until then. And so from a curriculum standpoint, it takes a while for the turnaround time. And we were in a holding place to get the sole source letter. And it was just conflicting because we've operated in the past on curriculum we did not have to go. So that's why this discussion is very helpful and informative for us, because I understand the $100,000 or RFP, because that's really what I'm really walking away with, or we can prove the sole source. But even still, we still have to go before the board if it's over $100,000.
Okay, so what about the items that were just discussed before we digress to this part of the agenda, like the ACES agreement for almost $600,000? Is there a procurement process associated with that? Do you know?
That's a great question.
I mean, it's Tiffany Jackson's on that one, not you, but.
Ms. DeMayo, do you have something to add on that specific
Yes,
question?
in the case of ACES, there are, I think it's called RESC. There are state educational resource center approved by the state of Connecticut. So we often use ACES or other similar providers like that that fall under the state education resource. Just to clarify that example.
Well, I would, if I could, we used
the reading program, HMH into reading, they were state approved, right? We still went before the Board of Alders. So is there if it's a state approved program, do we still need to go before the Board of Alders, even if it's over 100,000?
So let's do this. I think we can get into 1,000 questions here. And I think, one of the things Mr. Garrison and I have said is we will work with the Board of Education to make sure we are within compliance and on these different contracts. I think Mr. Mayo is right. Since I've been here, tuition has been one of those things that has kind of been exempt from like ACEs and things like that, just because it's in partnership with the state of Connecticut and a few other areas and criteria that it falls under. So again, I think it also depends on the category that we're talking about, right? Everything basically has a sub-layer to it to when we have to look at whether it needs Board of Alder approval or not. So I think we can certainly continue to work with Mr. Lamb and the team on, when things need to go before the board. We've been working on things as far as before it gets to F&O on if it needs Board of Alder approval or not, things like that. He's been communicating with Mr. Garris. And I think we need to open it up to the other areas of the Board of Education to make sure that we're in compliance.
And I'll just add one intention once there's clarification on what the alders decide to do with the proposed changes in the ordinance before them is to expand Mr. Lamb's flow chart that they have for the facilities related things and expand that into the academic related things as well to make it very clear for everybody. There's been conversations with Mr. Lamb and Ms. DeMayo, and I've been involved in some as well, where we want to expand that out so that just like there's clarity right now, if there's something facilities related, that this is the path that we'll be able to do it for all these kind of standard things that happen on the more academic side. I'll also, if I remember correctly, the purchasing ordinance does allow some exemptions when it comes to certain services with professionals like potentially, board certified staff, physicians, et cetera. That also is allowed for in the purchasing guidelines or ordinances that we also, I think, is going to get updated and that we'll also have as part of that flow chart. Ms. Connor, do you have something you needed to add? Or
I had a question, but I can ask it offline. It's not a big deal. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes, thank you. As it relates to the work of the Board of Alders, I hear that they're going to work to clarify the ordinances. And I'm wondering if that also means potentially changing or modifying the ordinances. What I'm thinking about is right now, my understanding is that the Board of Alders, that the Board of Education presents a budget and a final dollar amount, and that the Board of Alders approves it, but then the Board of Education decides how we spend that money and how we invest it in our district. So I would be curious if it does come up to a modification that more and more things, if more and more things leave the hands of the Board of Education and go before the Board of Alders for them to decide whether or not we can make this investment, then it's going to turn into the Board of Alders deciding the budget and also, or deciding the final amount of the budget, and then also deciding how the budget is invested within our district. So is it our understanding that the ordinances, that the existing language is going to be clarified, or is there actually going to be modifications made? And if so, should the Board of Education be involved, or when should the Board of Education be involved in that conversation or those conversations?
So the ordinance is being modified for clarification. So like I said, the dollar thresholds, everything else within the ordinance that the Board of Education already follows, that's what's being modified. So I'm not looking at it as they're getting into telling you how to spend your money. They're just looking at which contracts need to be approved through them and which contracts do not need to be approved through them. That's kind of what the ordinance is modifying. Along with, like I said, the dollar threshold. And again, what we submitted is public information. So I'll be more than happy, through Mr. Wilcox, Dr. Yarborough, to give you a copy of the changes that we made to the ordinance so you can see it. But yeah, it's really modifying for clarifications, just clarifying a lot of things that were left to interpretation that have come up through the years. But again, it's no different now than when you have to go before the Board of Alders for like the transportation contract or something like that, I hope that helps. I mean, we can talk a little bit more, but
I mean, it helps, but everything that goes before them, if they were to say no, then
Right.
then we change vendors, suppliers, etc. So it does have an impact on how we lead and govern. And
Absolutely.
I do want to make sure we do it in a way that is harmonious and responsible for our district. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I do agree. It would create an interesting set of issues if, for instance, for the 1-year contract extension for transportation, if the alders would have voted no on that, that would create an interesting nest of problems, which is why there are attorneys and folks to help navigate that. I think it behooves us to make sure that we're sending forward things that are economically and educationally responsible and being able to explain that. But yeah, it would be an interesting bit of conflict, particularly around something like transportation that also has implications at the state level in terms of rights for transportation for children, et cetera. But like a lot of interesting problems, I'm hoping we never have to encounter those.
Agreed.
And we can go, as you said, Dr. Yarborough, harmoniously. Is there anything else on this item? If I can just summarize, there's we'll have once we'll be watching what the alders do when it comes to that conversation that they have. And like I said, we want to make some updates at that point to our purchasing policy, and then expanding some sort of flow chart like Mr. Lamb has on his side of things, just to make it very clear so that a principal or other staff member knows that if they're going to want to have a proposal to have somebody do this thing, this is the process that they follow. And that'll also have suggested timelines, since there are, naturally going to be some things built into the, something has to go before the alders, that adds time to it. And Mr. Lamb's flow chart has that in place for his items. So we'll also have that in place for the more academic side. All right. If there's nothing else in this item, I want to thank Mr. Garris and Attorney Lamar and Mr. Gormany for joining us, and also Attorney Alexiadis. And thank you to the committee and to the staff that chimed in with some questions as well. All right.
Thank you.
They all can leave, but the rest of us, we have some items to go through. So let's go ahead and continue on. If I remember correctly, we were on agreement number 2. This also is with ACES around special education transportation.
Yep, this is our an agreement that we've engaged in for the last few years with ACES to provide regionalized special education transportation for students. Just to paint the picture more clearly, these are students who we would otherwise have to pay $500 a day. Again, for one student, it would cost us in excess of $100,000. This allows for us to share transportation costs with our area towns. Again, at a cost of $100 a student versus $500 a student per day.
All right, comments or questions from the committee? Dr. Yarbrough?
Thank you very much. Ms. Jackson, two questions. One is, for how many special ed students are we looking to provide transportation with this ACES contract?
It's 45 students.
45? Okay. Thank you. And my other question is, just as someone new to this, what is the difference or difference in service between what's provided through this ACES contract and our general transportation contract as it relates to special education transportation?
So it's multi-layered because we right now, through our transportation, we have transportation for our kids who are in what we call out of district placement. So this contract with ACES that's specifically for those kids who are in out of district placement. First Student, for instance, also services with some of our more specialized vehicles in district as well. What I'm referring to with the differences is again, it's not just First Student who provides some transportation for some of our students, but there's a host of different vendors because there may be one or two students that are going to some of our very specialized outplacement schools. The cost is extraordinary. So a few years ago, our RESC, as was mentioned before, they looked at how we could share costs with other towns that are essentially going to the same place. And again, that's where we have the reduction in cost. But there's a difference between First Student and this, because again, this is really looking at multiple towns doing this work for a reduced cost. And also for this group of students, it's not always First Student. There's also multiple vendors because there may be like a Singleton student, and given the location or what have you, sometimes it's not just First Student. There's multiple vendors that are servicing these students who are in highly specialized schools.
Okay, thank you. Would it be advantageous, or maybe the opposite, not practical, to have an agreement with ACES or some other private company, independent company, to expand their coverage of our special education transportation? Or am I not thinking about it right?
I would say that when there's two buckets. I don't want to say two types of students, but there's two buckets. There's the specialized transportation that we provide in district, and then there's a specialized transportation that we play for out of district schools. I think that what ACES has come up with by way of the regionalization is the most fiscally responsible, because essentially we are sharing costs with other towns for kids where we would have all had to pay, all the towns would have had, city and towns would have to pay a higher cost. I think that the service that we're being provided right now for special education and transportation, there's been a level of consistency with our staff and also the relationships that we have with the students. Right now, I could not see me recommending anything different for our in-district students. I think that, to your point, have we explored and looked at things for the out-of-district students? The answer is yes, and this is where we are today with the contract for ACES.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you for that. Hearing nothing else on this item, we'll go on to number 3, which is an agreement with ACES regarding training and additional learning around a IEP platform.
Yep. So the state, I was here probably a few meetings ago. The state provided us with an abstract or a grant of $52,000. I mentioned here before that the whole state of Connecticut, we are now using a whole new platform for our IEP. It's not been really easy for everyone. So they provided this grant, the state provided this grant enough for us to be able to provide some additional training for staff. So as such, we have ACES, who has been one of the lead trainers, working with our staff who are lead trainers, and also providing some training over the summer to some of our teachers who required some additional support, and then also new teachers, and they will do this even up and through the beginning of fall. So essentially, this is for them to provide some training and for us to be able to provide stipends for folks who are coming in the summer on our new IEP platform.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? All right, hearing none. I had none either. Let's move on to number 4, an agreement with All Point Home Care. Ms.
Yep.
Jackson?
This is again to provide nursing services, individual nursing services for students who require it as what we call a related service through their IEP. So again, we have students that we continue to educate within our schools, and in order for them to be here in our schools, or even if we have to, for one kiddo, we have to provide a nurse for that particular student. Even in an out-of-district placement, it is a cost to provide the individual nursing care.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? All right, hearing none, thank you very much. Let's go on to number 5, in agreement with Clifford Beers for 2 licensed social workers. Ms. Peters?
Yes, good afternoon. The next 3 agreements that I have is with Clifford Beers, Fairhaven Community Health Center, and Yale New Haven Hospital. Those are all covered under the abstract that I presented a couple of weeks back and was approved by the board. So those 3 contracts are for our health partner agencies who staff and operate most of our DPH-funded school-based health centers. So of our 18 school-based health centers, 11 are DPH funded. That abstract was for funding to cover these 3 agencies to staff those 11 sites. And so with Clifford Beers, it's $83,958, and that covers social workers, full-time social workers and therapists at Fairhaven School and Clinton Avenue schools. And then the next one with Fairhaven is $195,843,000. And those schools are listed there at Fairhaven, Clinton Avenue, Wilbercross, and John Martinez. Those are the DPH funded schools. They provide medical care and office manager, and in some cases, the social worker. Clifford Beers provides a social worker for 2 of those schools. And the third one is the Yale New Haven Hospital partnership, and there is $372,289 and they provide medical, social work, and office manager staffing for several schools: Morris Sheridan, Troop, Barnard, Hill House, and then those partners also have operate non-funded sites, so they have been our very strong partners and actually serve the lion's share of our students in New Haven that their families go to one of these partners. Cornell Scott will be presented on August 7th, but that is our 4th partner that was under that abstract.
All right, thank you. Are there any comments or questions related to items 5, 6, or 7? All right, I had no questions either, so thank you for that. We'll go ahead and move on to item 8, which is an agreement with Medical Billing of Connecticut. Also, Ms. Peters.
Right. Yes, Medical Billing of Connecticut is preferred for us because it's a local company in Connecticut. We've worked with billing companies in the past that are not from Connecticut, and they weren't very familiar with the dental billing and some of actually the medical pieces. And so we really left a lot of money on the table for reasons that it was unacceptable. So we moved to these folks, and they have a lot of expertise in dental billing particularly. And that's really what the majority of what we bill for. Right now, we're self-sustaining dental clinics in this school in New Haven Public Schools. And I run 6, oversee 6, and then Fairhaven has another 3. They do their own billing, but we have to bill basically from eligible services through insurance of students for cleanings, and we have a dentist that rotates through as well. But it's our only way of keeping the program going because we get no other funding really. So it's a self-sustaining program, and the billing is critical for us to continue. So the cost here is about $9,000 because we have to generate at least $1,000 for the billing company a month. If we don't meet the 1,000, we have to pay whatever the difference is. So it's 1,000. So I usually encumber 9,000 a year just to pay that. But like I said, it's self-sustaining. So we pay them 8% of whatever we generate. So we usually don't have to pull money beyond that because we generate enough from billing.
Thank you. Comments or questions? All right, hearing none. Thank you. We'll go on to item 9, which is an agreement with Gateway Partners. Mr. Lamb?
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. This is our annual lease with Gateway Partners LLC for covering the space that First Choice occupies on the first floor of this building. It's approximately 1,700 square feet, which has been occupied by School Choice for a number of years. We've been working in the last 2 years to move some programs out of the leased floors within the building. This is the last space within the building that is leased, and other than adult education, the last leased property within the district. We have, as with the city property, the health center, and with other city properties that are within the building, we received an 8% increase in our lease costs, which is consistent with all of the other leased areas of the building. And this will be for 1 year.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? All right, I had none either. So we'll move into the purchase orders, and let's see here. The first one is with Windstream Enterprise. Ms. Herrera?
I believe Mr. Conley is going to take this.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was having a hard time finding the unmute button. Windstream, in short, is voice communications for the district. And that is going to be all the schools, all the extensions. You pick up a telephone and you're talking on the voice, it's going through the Windstream service.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either, so we'll go ahead and move on to number 2, which is a contract with CNC Janitorial Supplies. Mr. Lane?
So Mr. Allegheny is off on his military leave. He'll be away for the next 2 weeks, so I'll be taking over, taking his items tonight. There are the next 6 items in the purchase orders and the 3 items in the contracts I will be talking about.
Thank you.
So this item is, the next 3 items are for CNC Janitorial Supplies, which is a new vendor to us. This is we used to have Hilliard Supplies, which this vendor was chosen by the city to provide janitorial supplies and services to the city of New Haven. And we are piggybacking off of what they're providing to the city departments. So this is under state contract for the first item for $50,000. Once we were told that we needed to change vendors, we immediately went into mode of trying to get something in place right away. So this was an emergency purchase order to provide materials for summer school, to make sure that we had janitorial products to cover summer school locations. So this was also done as a full contract for the entire year. The $440,000 will be the contract to provide janitorial supplies for all of our school locations throughout the year. And the third contract for $130,000 is to provide repairs to custodial equipment. We have buffers and writing, floor scrubbers, and machines like this that will be repaired through this contract.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? Dr. Yarbrough?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lamb. The question about the city has chosen this supplier. So just to clarify, we still have choice on which supplier we want to use, but we've chosen to go with this arrangement. Is that correct?
Yes, this was all done through city purchasing, where the vendor that was chosen or by bid before that contract expired, and through the purchasing process, this vendor was who the city has chosen to move forward with. And this is under the Connecticut state contract, so that their pricing is held through the Connecticut state contract, but it's also who the city has chosen to utilize. And instead of taking this out to bid, we chose to move forward with the city as well.
Thank you. And for number 3, I guess number 4 too, but for number 3, what did we invest last year for cleaning supplies?
The same amount. It's that amount has not changed.
Okay. And just 2 technical things. I think for number 3, the document for under reason, it says to provide repairs to custodial equipment. And yes, I think it's just that one for number 3. But that's all.
So for
number 3, it states to provide cleaning, janitorial, custodial equipment for the school year within NHPS under state contract. So it's providing, 3 is to provide equipment, and 4 is to provide service.
The 4 is to provide service. Okay, I'll double check what I'm looking at.
all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, when I'm looking at 4 is to provide repairs and services to the equipment, presumably the equipment that's sold under the previous 2.
Okay, great.
And just to clarify, I mean, it's still, this is who the city selected, but the city is just selecting the vendor that's also has the state contract. We tend to utilize state contracts because there's some ease to it, and the state's able, through its buying power collectively, to get some good advantageous pricing. So I think we're doing separate our own contracts with the same company. The city happens to be using, both of us are using this under the state contract.
Okay.
Is that the clarification? Am I correct on that, Mr. Lim?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, that helps me understand. And I did miswrite my note in terms of repairs to custodial equipment versus supplies. So thank you for that correction.
Thank you. And presumably with the summer programs for 50,000 and versus the state contract for the full school year, was the intention that that one was going to come in earlier to get it through quickly? And okay. All right.
So number 5 is a purchase order under state contract with Encore Fire Protection. Encore provides maintenance and repair to our sprinkler and fire alarm systems throughout the district. They provide the required inspections under state fire code, along with helping us with maintaining the many fire alarm issues that we have across the district.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this item? All right. I had none. So let's go on to, are there any questions on number 5, Dr. Yarborough?
I mean, just that there was no proposal attached, but other than that, not a question.
Item number 6 is under state contract with Coney Elevator.
If I could, just to clarify on number 5, it has the operations memo. That is that the proposal you're talking about, Dr. Yarborough? Number 5.
I was looking for a description from the.
I think I understand what he's looking for, and I can make sure that that's attached to these moving forward.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let's go on to number 6.
So number 6 is again under state contract for Coney Elevator to provide on-call elevator services. This is our elevator repair company that has been providing services to the district for many years. They know our equipment, they know what services, difficulties we have, and are familiar with access to how we access our buildings, and technicians are familiar with our principals and staff as well.
Thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either. Let's go on to number 7.
Number 7 is a purchase order for understate contract with Delaney Flooring. They're going to be providing replacement stair treads to Hill House High School across all of their stairwells. There's a significant number of stair treads and stairs that have presented safety issues that require repair. And this contract will, we're expecting this to come in significantly higher given the volume of work that we were looking at, but this came in at $78,000, which we felt was reasonable given the volume of work.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? My question is just related to, is this work going to be done before school starts, or is this going to be done throughout the year, or the implication? I imagine stairs are high traffic areas.
The intent is to have this done before school. However, given the issues that we have with supply chain, I don't know if that's going to be possible.
Okay. But I assume that your staff will be in communication with the building leaders as to if this is going to impinge on operations during school time.
Yes.
Thank you.
If the work does carry over into the school year, we will certainly make arrangements for work to be taken care of after hours or on the weekends.
All right, thank you. Let's move into the contracts, which there are 3. First one is a renewal with Eagle Rivet Roof Services.
So this, as we spoke about earlier, is a renewal option number 3 of 3. This will be the final year of this contract, the renewal of this contracts, which will require this to be put back out to bid. This is with Eagle Rivet Roofing Services. Eagle Rivet provides us with roof inspections to all of our roofs throughout the district, as well as on-call repairs.
Thank you. Comments or questions? I had none. Number 2 is a renewal with Lior Excavating.
So, excuse me, I just got to check something real quick before I speak. So this is renewal 3 of 3 for Lore Excavating, where again, this is the final renewal for this contract, and will need to be brought out to bid at the end of this year. They provide on-call asphalt repair services and replacement services for the district in the amount of $100,000. We do tend to spend this every year with asphalt repairs as well as repairs to sidewalks.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either. Final item here, a renewal with Pascarella Electric Company.
Again, the final year of renewals for this contract. And this is with Pascarella Electric Company. They have provided services to the district for several years. We've been extremely happy with them. They're one of our higher performing vendors. And this has been a contract that has been heavily utilized for replacement of lighting and other types of things. The contract's for $150,000. I'm expecting that this will be spent given the number of issues that we have. So we will probably put this out to bid early so that there's an additional contract that will take us through the end of the year.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions on this item? All right, hearing none. I'm going to go ahead and make the motion to move these items over. And that is, I move that we send these 3 abstracts, 9 agreements, 7 purchase orders, and 3 contracts onto the board, full board, with a recommendation to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
President Rivera?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well, so that item moves, and all those will move on to the full board. We'll jump into the discussion items. The first thing is as we've discussed in the past, we have a draft of some F&O discussion items, pretty much from our next meeting until the end of the year, not just to October. These are suggestions, these are desires, these are things that are kind of the things that are happening at the times that they typically do, like monthly reports. This can change. This isn't some sort of scripture here. This is the plan. If people want to add or subtract things to this, please let us know. But the goal is to provide kind of a roadmap as to what's coming, so people have time to prepare, and also to get people to think about, is there something else that should be on here? So maybe if you look at these list of items that are upcoming, you might be able to think about things that you think would be good for us to also look at. I'll just note that on the next meeting, we're going to take a look at the or at least we're scheduled to take a look at to review the building use permit, the fees and the rules for the coming year. I'll also be sending out, and we'll post on the website, policy 1330, which is, our policy is kind of dated, so it'll just be the CABE model policy for 1330, which basically basically says our buildings are for educational purposes to begin with, but they can be used for other purposes, and that the board and that the district has to have policies and procedures in order for people to apply to use them. So that's the gist of it, but I'll send that out to the committee, and we'll also have it posted in plenty of time for that. But those are some of the things that are coming up. We'll have some of our standard reports that we have, like things around small contract development programs or legal spending, change orders, etc. So, anybody else have anything they want to add on that? Not hearing anything, so we'll go ahead and move down. It looks like the next item is June monthly budget report. So is that going to be Ms. Hannon, Ms. Bourne? The floor is yours. Welcome to share your screen.
Okay, good evening. Christine, oh, okay, we're good to go. Okay, so basically what I'm doing tonight is just sharing the financial report for the period ending June 30th, 2023. Now, this is not a final report because there are still a lot of moving targets that are going on. So you will have a final report once we close the fiscal year, which is we close to the state the first week of September. I think it's September 1st, we have to send our final numbers to the state, and then we will submit a report, next scheduled report to the board to show you where we really ended up. Right now, as of today, you can keep going. As of today, we've spent 286 million between the general fund and the special funds grants. And the financial report for the general fund. So you can see at the bottom where we have a surplus, which is dwindling away fast, of about $79,000. And when I get further into the presentation, we'll tell you all the things that are still outstanding. So just look at that number 279, 249, because it's probably going to disappear in the next couple of days. So don't hold me to that number. Okay. And this slide always just tells you how to read the reports. And the second report is basically just the categories broken out on how we're doing thus far. And as you can see, our largest expenditures again are in the personnel lines, followed by I think transportation, and I think and then tuition. Those are our biggest expenditures. We can keep going. Okay, and the changes from the previous reports were basically that we looked at our current spending lines, and then we got to a point where they weren't even filling vacancies. The overtime budget for custodians was picked up by the ESSER funding. And then we also, in this report, we're showing all revenue sources thus far that we have received. We are still searching for revenue in the tuition accounts. And that is on one of the other slides, showing you that we're still, if you can go to the next slide, it talks about the mitigation efforts. And this is how we ended up coming down to the deficit, where we closed out a lot of purchase orders that just had not been shipped. We reprogrammed unspent funds wherever it was applicable. We continued all through the year to check requests for hire to make sure that those folks were actually going into vacancies, and basically they would have to be a vacancy that was in front of the students. We're continuing to monitor and request the grant applications to allow us to get indirect costs where we can. That next year probably may be an issue because of the fact that due to a lot of retirements at the state level, they have not replaced the person that does indirect cost. And as these grants had started coming in, they kind of move our numbers around, because there's certain things that you can't charge indirect cost rates, indirect costs to. But wherever there's a grant that is allowable because of the factors on staffing, we do try to make sure that we get money where we can. The unknowns for the additional costs, which may change at 79. I think today Christine brought in about 23 or 33 dollars worth of purchase orders that we weren't even aware that they had out there. So like I said, that 79 probably would disappear by the time I get through with this presentation. We still haven't gotten the unemployment costs from the city yet. The retirement payout costs for the teachers, we have not gotten that yet. And then the union retroactive pay for 2023, we've been able to mitigate that. But if there are any other things that come down the pipe, those figures are not, we think we have everything. But as I say, this is just a snapshot in time. For the financial reports for the grants, they are what they are. So we have a budget of, I think it was 182, we spent 107. And then we have still encumbrances of 7.3. A lot of that is contracts, and where people haven't given us their last payments. And then so we have a available balance of 66,985. Again, this is just till really for the month of June. It does not take into effect any other things that were coming down the pipe that we're cleaning up. So this number most likely would go up or down. And then this again is just our chart, which shows you, because some people like to see in graph form where we're spending our money. And as you can see, the bulk of that money is still on the full-time salary line, which we have to think about. We made a lot of investments this year, with the ESSER grant and the ARP ESSER grants. And as we all know, those grants are going away at the end of 2024. It doesn't look like the feds are going to give us an extension. They may not. I understand some folks are just saying now it's time to start pulling back. We won't allow that to happen, but we need to be cognizant of the fact that times are going to change next year. And that's in this page here, just how to read. So the next page is basically just the grants that we have received to date. So in 2021, and then we had carryover just about half, which is 103. Now keep in mind that some of these grants do not end. Some are 5 years, some are 4 years, some are 3 year. So in this year's funding, we received 75.8 of new dollars, and which brought us to 171. So you can see the big change here, where the numbers are start going in the other direction again. And that's because you have grants now that are sunsetting, so to speak. And those grants may be available next year, they may not, but we know that grants like ARP, ESSER, all the ARP, ESSER, and if you notice, I try to put those down to the bottom. A lot of those grants are the ones that are basically going away. We have the manufacturing grant, which was a $2 million. And of course, that's sunsetting in December. In December. So this is where we are right now. So I'll entertain any questions if you have any.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions? Dr. Yarbrough.
Yes, just thank you, Ms. Hannes and your team for the mitigation work.
Yeah, thank my team.
Yes, you all are not magicians, and you can't create money.
We can't.
But we do appreciate your work and your hard look at the dollars, and also helping to keep the district honest in terms of where we are financially. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. I'll echo that, and thank you all very much. I know it's a lot of hard work there. And not just on your all's part, because I know that as we're mitigating these deficits, it's in some cases, like where you mentioned vacancies, sometimes you have salary savings in a vacancy because you're not able to fill the position. So for instance, we've had a shortage, I think, of some security personnel, and there's a shortage, that's a shortage area. And so that's an unfortunate salary savings.
Correct.
There's also in some cases, maybe choose people that where it's educationally warranted to have a person in a position, not filling that position now because there's no money to afford it. So I know it's not only a lot of work on your all's part, but it's a lot of work on people that are managing those shortfalls in the buildings, but such as deficit spending.
And it's only gonna, I think our work is, this year was like the test. I think next year is really going to be much harder to work at because of the fact that, all the contracts are now coming into place and stuff. And, where we budgeted X amount of dollars, where, the contracts are coming in and much higher. We have contracts with the city, which I was mentioning today, are a big difference in what we had budgeted versus what folks are actually getting, plus retroactive. So, we just have our work cut out for us for next year because there's going to be a lot going on. And I don't know. I tell people the money tree is not across the street and it's not shedding. So we're really going to have to look at how we function, going into the future. And I just want to say thank you to the F&O committee, because you guys keep me on my toes and you ask the questions and you make me think.
Well,
so I just want to say thank you guys as well. You've been a great support team in terms of asking the right questions so that we all are on the same page.
Right. Thank you. And then also I'll just, going back to a previous item with those different schedule of upcoming discussion items, is we'll also be having some discussions, in this forum about that deficit for next year, looking at it early and efforts to mitigate it, because it's going to get more difficult, and it's going to be a difficult budget year next year. We also have, increases in certain costs, as was mentioned in the labor contracts, increased transportation costs, et cetera. So.
Correct. Yeah, I forgot transportation. You're right. Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else in this item?
No.
Okay, so the upshot is the deficit has been mitigated for now.
As of Yeah, as of 4:30 tonight.
As of 4:30, but as of
As of 4:30,
5:30
it's
or
been mitigated. Now
6:30?
tomorrow morning may be a different story, but
Okay,
we're on the
at
right
least,
track.
at least it's a noticeable large difference between the last financial report we received and this
Yeah.
one, as
Yes, we-
final year stuff is winding down. And
Yeah,
the
we've
true
been able to
picture.
cancel a lot of things off of the system where, invoices just had not come in, or folks that, like with contracts and stuff, where we might have overestimated what it was going to cost. And then at the end of the day, things came in less. So that's a good thing.
Okay, thank you. All right, there's nothing else on this item. Next item is discussion of possible action, the MOU with the City of New Haven for salary reimbursement for 3 positions. This is coming back. We had seen a previous draft, had good discussion. I know there was a lot of offline discussion and various wording changes and tinkerings, etc. So who's going to present this item?
I guess I'll present. So after our last F&O meeting and board, we had a meeting with a working group of Attorney Lanciatis, members from Corporation Counsel's Office, Mr. Wilcox, and a few others, to work through changing the language to meet the needs of the board, as well as some of the district members that had raised some questions and concerns. All of that language has been worked into the new or the posted MOU. Attorney Lanciatis has been credited with putting together all these changes and getting a final draft to myself. But what you see before you is a collaboration between a lot of folks to get the language right. Some things that were changed include identifying the purchasing coordinator to take direction from Ms. Hannons as CFO or her designee. There was also some language change to identify where money was coming from and to for these 3 positions. And then a little bit of language change around some of the reporting structure to accentuate the collaboration between both the city and the Board of Ed with these positions. Anything you want to add, Ilya?
So there were cleaned up a number of typographical errors that was in the draft that the committee previously saw, and then largely technical corrections about identifying which accounts the funds were intended to come from and go to, and particularly where they would go, and as Tom said, to address CFO Hannon's concerns, and then we modified the termination clause in accordance with other comments that it can be terminated either in whole or in part. So with regard to any one of the positions, you don't, if you want to terminate one of them, you don't have to throw out the whole agreement. That's what it says. If you want not terminate the person, but terminate the funding. I think that's between what Tom said and I think that's about it.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I'll just say, I think everything's been said. From what I was looking over, and I think it addressed a lot of the concerns that have been raised, and I think that it's in much better shape in terms of clarifying, where people are going to be, their primary work locations, to whom they're reporting for their daily work. but then also that this can be terminated whole or in part, along with clauses that if there are conflicts, that everybody's agreeing to work together to resolve those, so we don't have to get to that point. So I think it's an even better agreement based on the extra work that went on this in the last 2 weeks. If nobody else has anything to add, then I would like to make a motion, and that is I move that we send to the full board with a recommendation to approve this MOU with the City of New Haven for the 3 salary reimbursements for the 3 positions.
Second.
Moved in second. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
President Rivera,
Yes.
I'm a yes as well, so that'll move on. The next item is just Series 3000 transportation policies. Due to my not sending them out, we don't have these to take a look at tonight, and I apologize for that. I will rectify that. We'll be sending them to the committee and to staff to distribute to whoever needs it, and then it'll be on the agendas for upcoming meetings. And these are just what we've been doing. These are the base CABE model policies for Series 3000s with, changes in order to make it fit for us here in New Haven. The next item is listed as discussion as possible action. I don't know that any action is needed here, but as a report from the Citywide School Building and Stewardship Committee, when we met last Thursday, which, just as a reminder, we meet once a month, second Thursday, and go over lots of things like large capital projects in the district and maintenance updates, etc., from Mr. Lamb and his team. But the other thing that we did is we discussed and voted on a recommendation to the full board to return to the City of New Haven control of the building. I think it's 333 Valley Street, also known as the Shack, which was used by the district in the past, but not for several years, and has been being utilized by Alder Honda Smith for a variety of great programming going on there. But since there is no more educational needs for this, it seemed appropriate to return it to the city so that they can do with it what they will, hopefully having the continued good programming that's in there. I guess my question is for Mr. Lamb or Attorney Alexiadis, is anything needed in this group? I don't know that anything's needed, but is there a
from what I've seen from past items that have been brought through this, it goes directly to the board from stewardship.
All right, so it'll be a voting item at the next board meeting. There'll be a memo.
I have the memo drafted. I'll circulate it to you.
So please circulate that to this committee. I guess it'll also go to the board.
There's very specific language for the memo. So it's one of those whereas things. So that language was pulled off of previous submissions. So I'll have Attorney Alexiadis take a look at it quickly just to verify that the language is correct and nothing is missing, and then I'll circulate it to the group.
Yes, I think the language is coming in part from memos like when the board returns control of the former Strong School location down on whatever it's on, Grand or Ferry. What's it on?
Grand Avenue.
Grand Avenue, that building back in, I think, 2008. It's similar language. But any comments or questions now on this? Okay. And just if anybody, we have control of these locations and buildings for educational purposes, and then when we're done, we return them. And we're also following some. When our former CFO, Mr. Penn, was here, he also asked, and we received also some guidance from Attorney Mooney as to also any other language that's needed, which will also help inform this. So all the T's are being crossed, I's dotted, etc. So looking at the agenda, that seems to be the last item. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And it's moved and seconded, and we cannot discuss it. So we're going to vote. Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
President Rivera,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Thank you all very much. Hope you have a safe evening and a good day tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.